The massive alien ship approached Earth's orbit with a gentle hum that belied its size. Inside, Senior Envoy Tejo adjusted his formal diplomatic attire, designed to make a positive first impression on the newly discovered humans. After decades of observation, the Galactic Confederation had finally decided to make official contact with Earth, hoping to welcome the promising species into their peaceful alliance of 37 spacefaring civilizations. Remember, the observation reports indicate these humans have only recently achieved reliable interplanetary travel. Tejo instructed his team of 5 diplomats. They will likely be overwhelmed by our technology. Be patient and kind. The diplomatic shuttle departed the mothership, descending through Earth's atmosphere toward the designated meeting point, a special facility built by the United Nations Space Command in Geneva, Switzerland. As they landed, Tejo saw a welcoming party of humans dressed in formal military uniforms waiting on the landing pad. Admiral Junho stepped forward as the alien delegation emerged from their shuttle. Despite extensive preparation for this moment, he still felt a flutter of excitement. Humanity's first official contact with an alien civilization would define their place in the galaxy. "Welcome to Earth," Junho said, performing the formal bow that intelligence suggested was the Confederation's preferred greeting. "We are honored by your presence." Tejo returned the gesture. "The honor is ours. The Confederation has watched your progress with great interest." Inside the facility, both delegations sat around a large circular table. Screens on the walls displayed representatives from various Earth governments, watching the historic meeting with intense interest. The discussions began smoothly with exchanges of cultural information and basic diplomatic protocols. Then Admiral Junho said something that caused Tejo to freeze momentarily. "We hope to discuss potential military cooperation," the Admiral stated. "There are regions of space where our exploratory vessels have detected unusual energy signatures that concern our scientists." Tejo blinked his 4 eyes in sequence, an expression of confusion in his species. "Military cooperation. We primarily seek cultural and scientific exchange." "Of course," Junho nodded. "But defense is also important. We would be honored to show you our modest defense fleet. It's currently stationed in orbit around Mars during training exercises." The aliens exchanged glances. In their experience, newly, spacefaring races typically had only a handful of multi-purpose vessels, primarily designed for exploration, with minimal defensive capabilities. They agreed to the tour more out of politeness than interest. The next day, a human transport vessel carried both delegations to Mars. Tejo gazed out the viewport, admiring the red planet. The human vessel was surprisingly comfortable, though. The aliens noticed it had unusual structural reinforcements that seemed unnecessary for a transport ship. "We're approaching the fleet now," announced the pilot. As they cleared Mars's orbit, the transport's viewports revealed a formation that caused all 6 aliens to fall completely silent. Stretched before them was not the small collection of exploratory vessels they had expected, but an armada of massive ships, dark angular constructions bristling with what were unmistakably weapon systems, sensor arrays, and launch tubes. "Is that your entire space fleet?" asked Tejo carefully. "Oh no," replied Junho with obvious pride. "This is just Battle Group 7, 3 heavy cruisers, 6 destroyers, and support vessels. We have 6 other battle groups of similar size deployed throughout the solar system." Tejo stared at the nearest vessel, a behemoth nearly 2 kilometers long with armor plating meters thick, and what appeared to be multiple launch bays for smaller craft. "Would you like to tour our flagship, the UNSC Invincible?" Junho offered, gesturing toward the largest ship. "These vessels," Tejo said slowly, "they appear to be designed specifically for combat." Junho looked confused. "Well, yes, they're warships." "Warships," repeated Tejo, the translator struggling with a concept that had no direct equivalent in his language. "Not scientific vessels with defensive capabilities?" "We have those too," Junho said, misunderstanding the aliens' confusion. "Our exploration fleet is deployed in the outer system. These are our defensive vessels." As they docked with the Invincible, Tejo composed a private message to the Confederation Council. "Urgent update on human contact. They have developed spacecraft Designed exclusively for warfare, not multi-purpose vessels with defensive capabilities, dedicated war machines. Their modest defense fleet includes dozens of heavily armed vessels that could outmatch anything in our peacekeeping forces, requesting immediate guidance. Inside the Invincible, the aliens' discomfort grew as they walked through corridors, lined with armed personnel. The ship's design prioritized combat functionality over comfort, redundant systems, armored bulkheads, and weapon stations throughout. In the command center, Captain Jiwoo greeted them warmly. "Welcome aboard. We're conducting battle drills today, but we've paused them for your visit." "Battle drills?" asked one of Taiho's team. "Simulated combat scenarios," Jiwoo explained. "We run them daily to keep the crew sharp." She proudly showed them the weapons control station, where operators demonstrated the targeting systems for the ship's main cannons, energy weapons powerful enough to shatter small moons. "And these are our point defense systems," Jiwoo continued, unaware of the aliens' growing horror. "They can track and eliminate thousands of incoming projectiles simultaneously." Later, as the delegation returned to their shuttle, Taiho remained silent, processing what he had seen. The humans had built these monstrous vessels without ever encountering hostile aliens. They had prepared for war among the stars before even stepping beyond their solar system. "You seem troubled," Junho said as they prepared to depart. "Is everything all right?" Taiho chose his words carefully. "Your ships are impressive. They are unlike anything in the Confederation." "Thank you," Junho smiled. "We hope they never need to be used in actual combat. But humanity believes in being prepared." As their shuttle detached from the Invincible, Taiho gazed back at the human battle fleet. For the first time in his long, diplomatic career, he felt genuinely afraid, not of the humans themselves, but of what their warships represented. A species that had spent its history preparing for conflict rather than cooperation. The Confederation would need to completely reconsider their approach to these humans. They were not simply another peaceful species ready to join their alliance. They were something the galaxy had not seen in thousands of years, a race of warriors who built ships specifically for war. 1 month after first contact, a Confederation research team arrived at Earth. The 5 specialists, led by scientist Mina, had been tasked with understanding what their leadership called the human aberration, the development of specialized military vessels. Each member of the team represented a different scientific discipline, from psychology to engineering. The human leadership welcomed them at the same Geneva facility where first contact had occurred. Admiral Hyuk stood tall in his formal uniform, flanked by military officers and a few civilian scientists. "We're honored to host your research team," Hyuk said with a polite bow. "Whatever questions you have about our vessels or defense strategies, we'll answer as openly as possible." Mina nodded, her 4-fingered hand making the Confederation gesture of respect. "We appreciate your transparency. Our goal is simply to understand." The first formal meeting began in a conference room with views of Lake Geneva. Large screens displayed technical specifications of various human warship classes. Mina studied the documents with growing confusion. "Your ship designs follow patterns we've never seen in other spacefaring species," she said. 96% of known civilizations develop vessels primarily for exploration and commerce, with defensive systems added only as necessary. Admiral Hyuk sipped his water before responding. "Perhaps that's because 96% of spacefaring species haven't spent thousands of years fighting each other on their home planets." The room fell silent. The alien researchers exchanged glances. "You designed these ships because you fought each other?" asked Do-Yoon, the team's psychologist. Hyuk nodded. "Human history is filled with naval warfare, battleships, destroyers, aircraft carriers. These concepts shaped our thinking long before we reached space. Over the next several days, the research team reviewed human history. They watched documentaries about ancient naval battles, world wars, and the evolution of military strategy. To the aliens, it seemed incomprehensible that a species would direct so much of its creativity and resources toward better ways to fight itself. "But you've had peace for nearly a century now," said Mina during a dinner with human officials. "Why continue building warships?" Old habits, said one general with a laugh that the aliens didn't share. And perhaps because we understood, something that your species didn't have to learn, that the universe might not always be friendly. On the 5th day of their visit, the aliens were invited to tour the UNSC Dauntless, Earth's newest and most advanced dreadnought. As their shuttle approached the massive vessel in Earth orbit, Mina felt a sense of dread she couldn't quite explain. Captain Subin welcomed them aboard with the same politeness they'd experienced from all humans. We've prepared a comprehensive tour. Please ask questions freely. Nothing is classified for our Confederation guests. The aliens were increasingly disturbed by what they saw. The ship's outer hull was composed of armor plating 4 meters thick in some places. Internal sections were separated by blast doors that could seal automatically in case of hull breach. Weapon systems lined the outer structure: railguns, missile tubes, energy projectors capable of devastating planetary surfaces. This section houses our point defense network, Subin explained as they entered a control room. It can track and eliminate up to 10,000 incoming projectiles simultaneously. What species would attack with 10,000 projectiles? Asked Mina. Subin shrugged. None that we know of. But we like to be prepared. The tour continued to engineering, where the aliens were shown redundant power systems, backup life support, and emergency protocols for every conceivable disaster. And this, said Subin with particular pride, is our battle damage simulation room. The large chamber contained sections of ship corridors that appeared deliberately damaged. Panels hung loose, exposed wiring sparked, and artificial smoke filled portions of the room. We damage our own ship? Asked Do-hyun in confusion. Not the actual ship, Subin laughed. This is a training facility. Crew members practice emergency repairs during simulated combat conditions. Lights flashing, alarms blaring, smoke filling the corridors. We make it as realistic as possible. As they watched, a team of engineers rushed into the simulation room. An officer shouted orders as they began repairing the damaged sections with practiced efficiency, even as the lights flickered and sirens wailed. The sight was too much for Do-hyun. The psychologist swayed on his feet and then collapsed. The other aliens rushed to help him while the humans called for medical assistance. When Do-hyun recovered in the ship's medical bay, he apologized profusely. I'm sorry for the disruption. It was just an overwhelming. Nothing to apologize for, said the ship's doctor kindly. Many humans feel the same way their first time in battle drills. Later, as the tour continued, Mina pulled Subin aside. You deliberately damage your own ship. For practice? Better to learn when lives aren't at stake, Subin replied. We call it preparedness, not paranoia. That evening, back in their quarters at the Geneva facility, the alien team held a private discussion. Their entire approach to space travel is centered around combat readiness, said Mina. It's as if they expect to be attacked at any moment. Perhaps more disturbing, added the team's sociologist, is that they've never even encountered a hostile alien species. They built these war machines based solely on their history of fighting each other. Should we be afraid of them? Asked one of the younger researchers. Mina considered the question carefully. I don't think they intend to use these ships aggressively. But they've developed military technology far beyond anything in the Confederation. Their smallest destroyers could outmatch our largest vessels. Do-hyun, still pale from his earlier episode, spoke quietly. What troubles me most isn't their technology but their mindset. They prepare for the worst as a matter of course. They train for disasters daily. They expect things to go wrong. And we don't, Mina realized. The Confederation has enjoyed peace for so long that we've forgotten what it means to be truly prepared for danger. She looked out the window at the night sky, wondering what other surprises these humans might hold, and whether the Confederation's peaceful approach to the universe was naive rather than enlightened. The threat arrived without warning. On a quiet Tuesday morning, the long-range sensors of Confederation Outpost Epsilon detected unusual energy signatures approaching from deep space. The scientific team focused on astronomical research initially classified it as a natural phenomenon, perhaps an unusual comet or asteroid cluster. By Wednesday, 3 more outposts had detected similar signatures. By Friday, Outpost Epsilon had gone silent. In the Confederation's Central Council chamber, emergency alerts flashed across information screens. Senior Counselor Taiho stood before the assembled representatives of 37 species, his normally composed features tight with concern. The entity we are calling the Harvester Swarm appears to be a non-sentient, biologically engineered weapon system, he explained. Our historians believe it may have been created by the ancients during their civil war, then lost in deep space when that civilization destroyed itself. Images appeared on the large screens, swarms of metallic organic entities moving with disturbing coordination, surrounding and systematically dismantling Confederation structures. Initial encounters with our outpost defense vessels have been unsuccessful, Taiho continued carefully. Standard deterrence protocols have had minimal effect. What Taiho didn't say, what the classified reports made painfully clear, was that Confederation vessels had been utterly outmatched. Their ships, essentially research vessels with limited defensive capabilities, had been overwhelmed within minutes. On Earth, Admiral Hayek reviewed the data transmitted by the Confederation with growing concern. He sat in the secure command center beneath Geneva, surrounded by his senior staff, watching footage of the swarm's attack patterns. They're not just destructive, he observed. They're efficient. See how they target power systems first, then life support? This isn't random. It's programmed behavior. His communications officer looked up from her console. Sir, we're receiving a priority transmission from Proxima Centauri IV. The Confederation colony there is under attack. Hyuk straightened immediately. How many civilians? Approximately 12,000 Confederation citizens, sir. Hyuk didn't hesitate. Alert Battle Group 3. I want the Dauntless and full escort ready for immediate departure. We're responding to their distress call. One of his advisors cleared his throat nervously. Sir, the Confederation hasn't formally requested military assistance. This could be seen as an unsanctioned intervention. They're asking for help, Hayek replied simply. That's all the sanction I need. Prepare for departure in 6 hours. 4 days later, the human battle group arrived at Proxima Centauri IV to find a desperate situation. The colony's orbital platforms had already been destroyed. 3 Confederation vessels attempted to evacuate civilians while using their limited point defense systems against the swarm, but they were clearly losing ground. From the command deck of the Dauntless, Captain Subin assessed the tactical display. Swarm elements are targeting the evacuation ships. Confederation vessels are trying to shield them, but their defensive capabilities are minimal. Admiral Hugh studied the patterns for only moments before making his decision. Deploy the battle group in Formation Delta. Destroyers will run interference for the evacuation vessels. The Dauntless will engage the main swarm concentration. Across the human fleet crews moved with practiced efficiency to battle stations. Weapon systems powered up, shields strengthened, and fighter craft prepared for launch. This is what these ships were built for, Hayuk told his officers calmly. Not to start conflicts, but to end them. On the surface of Proxima Centauri IV, scientist Mina huddled with other civilians in an underground shelter. The colony's limited defenses had been quickly overwhelmed, and now they could only wait for evacuation ships. Something's changing, said a technician monitoring the orbital battle. New ships have arrived. They're engaging the swarm directly. Mina rushed to the monitor and recognized the distinctive silhouette of human warships. The vessels she had, once found so disturbing, were now moving with deadly purpose, their weapons blazing against the swarm entities. The human ships executed combat maneuvers that seemed impossible for vessels their size. Destroyers deliberately drew swarm attacks away from the evacuation ships, absorbing damage that would have destroyed any Confederation vessel, yet continuing to fight. The Dauntless moved directly into the thickest concentration of the swarm. Its point defense systems created a sphere of fire around the massive ship, destroying dozens of swarm entities each second. Its main cannons fired in coordinated patterns, disrupting the swarm's formations and creating safe corridors for the evacuees. "The humans are buying us time," said the colony administrator. "We must get everyone to the evacuation points immediately." Hours later, as the last civilian ships prepared to depart, Mina found herself watching the battle from a viewport. The human vessels were still fighting, though visibly damaged. The Dauntless had taken the worst hits. Sections of its hull were breached, and fires burned in some compartments, yet it continued to maneuver and fire with undiminished effectiveness. She thought back to the battle damage simulation room she had seen on her tour, the training exercises that had seemed so paranoid and disturbing. Now those same drills were keeping the ship operational despite damage that would have caused any Confederation vessel to retreat or surrender. "They prepared for this," she whispered to herself. "All those simulations, all those redundant systems, they were ready for a fight that they didn't even know was coming." As her evacuation ship cleared the planet's atmosphere, Mina watched. The human destroyers form a protective screen around the civilian vessels. The Dauntless remained behind, still engaging the swarm to cover their escape. "Will they make it?" asked a frightened child sitting next to her. Mina thought about the ship's design, the backup systems, the trained crew. "Yes," she said with growing confidence. "Their ships were built for this. They'll make it." In the command center of the Dauntless, Admiral Hayuk stood calmly despite the chaos around him. Damage reports flooded in, but the ship's redundant systems kept it operational. Fire control teams worked efficiently in sections exposed to vacuum, protected by their specialized suits. "All civilian ships clear of the combat zone," reported his communications officer. Yuk nodded. "Signal the fleet. Mission accomplished. We have demonstrated what humanity stands for. Now let's bring everyone home." As the battle group disengaged and prepared for departure, leaving behind hundreds of destroyed swarm entities, Hayuk composed a simple message to Earth. Engagement successful. Confederation civilians evacuated. Human warships have proven their purpose. The central chamber of the Confederation Council fell silent as the holographic display showed the Battle of Proxima Centauri IV. The gathered representatives watched human warships moving with precision against the swarm, taking damage that would have destroyed their own vessels, yet continuing to fight. When the recording ended, the arguments began immediately. "These humans saved thousands of our citizens," said Councillor Taiho, now elevated to senior counselor after his first-hand experience with humans. Their intervention was decisive and effective. Councillor Taiwan, representing one of the oldest Confederation species, rose in opposition. "Their vessels are abominations, designed solely for destruction. How can we align ourselves with such a philosophy?" The debate continued for hours. Many species remained deeply uncomfortable with the idea of formal military cooperation with humans despite the successful defense of Proxima Centauri IV. "We have maintained peace through diplomacy for 10,000 years, argued one representative. "Embracing these warships would change who we are as a civilization." Taiho's patience finally broke. "Our theoretical moral superiority will mean nothing if our civilization is destroyed. The humans have what we need most right now: experience with war." The final vote was close, but reality proved persuasive. The swarm was advancing toward densely populated core systems of the Confederation. With their limited defensive capabilities, millions of lives would be lost without help. The Confederation formally requested human military assistance. Meanwhile, on Earth, humanity had already begun preparations without waiting for the formal request. Admiral Hayuk stood in a massive shipyard facility in Earth orbit, watching as civilian vessels were retrofitted with weapon systems. Nearby, military shipbuilding had been accelerated to maximum capacity. 12 new destroyers will be combat-ready within the month, reported his aide. The response to the volunteer call has been overwhelming. Hyuk nodded with satisfaction. Humanity had always prepared for this moment, even if they hadn't known what form the threat would take. Their warships, once viewed with suspicion by the Confederation, were now their greatest hope. At the Geneva facility, Engineer Subin worked alongside Do Hyun, the Confederation psychologist who had once fainted aboard the Dauntless. They were part of a joint team adapting Confederation vessels for combat operations. Why would you install triply redundant power conduits? Asked Do-hyun, watching Subin modify a sleek Confederation science vessel. It adds significant weight and reduces efficiency. Because in combat things break, Subin replied simply. And when they do, people die if there's no backup. Do-hyun considered this. The Confederation approach to ship design had always prioritized efficiency and elegance. The idea of deliberately adding excess systems seemed wasteful, until he remembered the footage from Proxima Centauri 4, where damaged human ships had continued fighting when Confederation vessels would have been crippled. Our cultures are very different, Do-hyun said carefully. Your people have always prepared for conflict. Subin paused her work. We don't want war. We just respect its possibility enough to be ready for it. She pointed to the ship they were modifying. This vessel is beautiful, but beauty won't save your crew if the hull is breached. Redundancy will. Across the solar system, similar scenes played out as human and alien crews worked to integrate their technologies and techniques. The Confederation brought advanced sensor systems and efficient energy management, while humans contributed their expertise in defensive systems and combat tactics. Not all the cultural exchanges went smoothly. Many Confederation species remained, disturbed by humanity's casual approach to weaponry and their constant battle drills. Some human crews, in turn, were frustrated by what they perceived as naivety among their alien counterparts. As the swarm advanced relentlessly toward the core systems, a joint fleet assembled at Tau Ceti. Human warships formed the front line, while modified Confederation vessels took support positions. Admiral Hyuk stood on the bridge of the repaired Dauntless, now serving as the fleet's command vessel. On the view screens around him, he could see hundreds of ships, the largest combined force in known history. A communication request came through from the Confederation flagship. Taiho's face appeared on the screen, flanked by other senior Confederation officials. The fleet is assembled, Admiral, said Taiho formally. We've received reports that the swarm will reach this system within 24 hours. Hyuk nodded. My tactical officers have prepared a comprehensive battle plan. We'll transmit it immediately for your review. There was a brief pause before Taiho responded. The Confederation Council has voted to grant you full tactical command of the combined fleet, Admiral. Our vessels will follow your orders without question. Hyuk hadn't expected this level of trust. I'm honored by your confidence, Counselor. Not confidence, Taiho corrected. Necessity. Your species understands war in ways ours never had to. We recognize that now. After the communication ended, Hyuk called a meeting of all ship captains, both human and alien. They gathered virtually, hundreds of faces on screens around the Dauntless's conference room. The battle ahead will be unlike anything either of our civilizations has faced, Hyuk began. The swarm outnumbers us significantly. They do not fear death because they do not truly live. But we have advantages they lack: intelligence, adaptability, and purpose. He displayed the tactical plan, showing how human warships would form the main battle line while Confederation vessels provided sensor support and targeted strikes. Some of your ships will take damage, he told the Confederation captains plainly. Some may be destroyed. This is the reality of war that my species has always understood. But remember, every vessel that stands its ground protects countless civilian lives. Hyuk looked around at the gathered faces, so different in appearance, yet united in purpose. We fight not just for humanity today, but for all sentient life. The differences in our ship designs reflect the differences in our histories. But today we write a new history together. As the captains returned to their ships, Hyuk stood alone at the viewport, watching the assembled fleet. Human vessels, dark and angular, bristling with weapons. Confederation ships, sleek and elegant, now modified with human defensive systems. Ready all ships for combat, he ordered. The swarm arrives tomorrow. Let them find us prepared. Throughout the fleet, crews made final preparations. On the modified Confederation vessels, many crew members still felt uncomfortable with the weapons now mounted on their beautiful ships. Yet as they watched the calm efficiency of their human counterparts, some began to understand. It wasn't that humans wanted war. They had simply never had the luxury of believing it couldn't happen. The swarm arrived at Tau Ceti with the rising of the system's sun. First appearing as distant specks on sensor screens, they quickly resolved into a vast cloud of metallic organic entities, moving with disturbing coordination. There were thousands of them, far more than had been encountered at Proxima Centauri 4. On the bridge of the Dauntless, Admiral Hayek watched the tactical display with calm focus. Beside him stood Taiho, representing the Confederation leadership. "There are so many," Taiho whispered, his four eyes widening at the sight. Yuk nodded. "Numbers aren't everything in battle. Formation, discipline, and purpose matter more." He activated the fleet-wide communication system. All vessels, assume battle positions. Human destroyers, advance to coordinate points. Confederation support ships, maintain sensor lock and prepare targeting data. The combined fleet moved with practiced precision. Human warships formed the front line, their heavily armored hulls positioned to shield the more vulnerable Confederation vessels. Smaller human fighters launched from carrier ships forming protective screens. "The swarm is accelerating," reported the sensor officer. "They'll reach our position in 3 minutes. All ships, weapons free," ordered Hayek. "Remember, your training. Remember what we fight for." The first wave of the swarm crashed against the human battle line like a tide against a seawall. The space around Tau Ceti lit up with weapons fire as human destroyers engaged the enemy entities at point-blank range. The Dauntless took the brunt of the initial assault, its massive bulk drawing the majority of attackers. From her position on a Confederation support vessel, scientist Mina watched in astonishment. The human warships were executing complex formation maneuvers despite being under heavy attack. They deliberately positioned themselves to draw swarm entities away from the more vulnerable Confederation ships, taking damage that would have immediately destroyed her own vessel. Within hours, the Dauntless had suffered critical damage to multiple systems. Breaches had opened in several hull sections and fires burned throughout the lower decks. Yet the massive warship continued fighting, its redundant systems keeping weapons and engines operational. "How are they still in combat?" Mina asked over the communication channel to Taiho, who remained on the Dauntless's bridge. "Because they built their ships expecting to be damaged," he replied, his voice filled with new understanding. "Perhaps that's their greatest insight, not hoping for peace but preparing for its absence." On the Dauntless, damage control teams worked in environments that would have triggered immediate evacuation protocols on any Confederation vessel. Engineers in specialized suits repaired systems in sections exposed to vacuum. Medical teams treated the wounded in backup facilities after the main medical bay took a direct hit. By the end of the first day, 3 human destroyers had been destroyed, and most others showed significant damage. Yet the battle line held, protecting the Confederation ships that provided crucial targeting data. The second day brought a shift in tactics. Using information from Confederation long-range sensors, human warships began targeting what appeared to be coordination nodes within the swarm. The effect was immediate. Sections of the swarm began moving less efficiently, attacking randomly rather than focusing on vital systems. "We're making progress," Hayek told his exhausted bridge crew during a brief lull. "The swarm is adapting but slower than we are." A junior officer approached with a damage report. "Sir, life support is failing on decks 7 through 12. Structural integrity in the port section is below 30%. Hyuk reviewed the information calmly. "Evacuate non-essential personnel from those sections. Reroute power from auxiliary systems to maintain weapon capability." Taiho, who had remained on the bridge throughout the battle, marveled at the human response to what seemed like catastrophic damage. On a Confederation vessel, such conditions would have led to immediate surrender or retreat. Here, they were treated as expected challenges, planned for in advance. The third day brought a desperate gamble. The swarm had begun concentrating its attacks on the Dauntless, seemingly recognizing it as the command vessel. With systems failing faster than they could be repaired, Hyuk knew they couldn't maintain their position much longer. "All ships, execute Operation Hammer and Anvil," he ordered. The remaining human destroyers suddenly broke formation, moving away from the Dauntless in seemingly random directions. The swarm, momentarily confused by this change, divided to pursue them. That's when the Confederation vessels, their positions disguised until now by sensor jamming, unleashed a coordinated strike against the scattered swarm elements. Caught between human warships that refused to die despite their damage and Confederation precision strikes, the swarm's collective intelligence appeared to make a calculation. After 3 days of continuous combat, the remaining swarm entities suddenly changed course, accelerating away from Tau Ceti toward deep space. "They're retreating," announced the sensor officer, disbelief in her voice. A cheer erupted across the bridge. Hayek allowed himself a small smile before activating the fleet-wide channel. "All vessels maintain defensive positions. Damage control teams continue repairs. The day is ours, but remain vigilant." In the aftermath, the combined fleet limped back to the nearest Confederation shipyard. The human vessels showed battle damage that shocked even their alien allies. Hulls torn open to space, entire sections missing, makeshift repairs holding critical systems together. Yet most remained operational, their crews exhausted, but alive. 6 months later, the Confederation Council established a permanent military cooperation committee with humans serving as strategic advisors. The next generation of Confederation vessels began incorporating human design principles, redundancy, compartmentalization, and dedicated combat capabilities. At the unveiling ceremony for the Unity, the first Confederation vessel designed specifically for defense, Engineer Subin stood alongside Do-hyun on the observation deck. Below them, human and alien engineers worked side by side, bridging their different perspectives. "It's still beautiful," Do-hyun said quietly, admiring the ship's elegant lines despite its new armor and weapon systems. "I worried that making it a warship would make it ugly somehow." Subin smiled. "The most beautiful ship is the one that brings its crew home again." Admiral Hayek and Senior Counselor Taiho joined them at the viewport, watching as the Unity prepared for its maiden voyage. "The swarm has retreated to deep space, but our long-range sensors detect they may be regrouping," said Taiho. "We would never have survived without your warships." Hayek shook his head. "Without your sensors and coordination, we would have been fighting blind. It was the combination of our approaches that won the day. Our species spent millennia developing vessels for peace, assuming the universe would match our intentions," Taiho acknowledged. "Your people built for war, hoping never to use that capability. And now?" asked Subin. "Now we build ships that honor both perspectives," Yuk replied, gesturing toward the Unity. "Vessels that hope for peace but are prepared for its absence. That's not contradiction, it's wisdom." As the Unity's engines glowed to life, human and Confederation crews stood together on its bridge. The ship moved gracefully out of dock, its new design representing not just a technical achievement but a philosophical one, the recognition that preserving peace sometimes required the strength to defend it. The ship's captain, a veteran of the Battle of Tau Ceti, gave the order to proceed to their first patrol zone. "The Unity is ready. Let anyone who threatens peace find us prepared."